currently I shoot commercially and fine arts, both things. And commercially, I shoot luxury real estate, and in terms of fine arts, I shoot documentary in Mexico. I started out a documentary project in Mexico. It's been going on for a few years now, and I like it because it's um, go back to my country um, with different eyes than when you take it for granted. The project was inspired by the Mexican avant-garde after the 1920s. You know how they started having this interesting historic period where mostly what happened was that Mexico was coming together, trying national identity that was neither Indian nor European, but legitimately Mexican. A lot of the Mexican avant was trying to just put together this thing either by personal conviction or driven by government agenda from all sorts of political sides of the political spectrum. There was, the left and the right. Whenever they would take power, because there was continuous alternating powers between the two of them, they would just still promote this national identity, which was a priority for unity in the country. So they developed a very particular style. Not only the muralists, but also Figueroa as a cinematographer. They called the fourth muralist, even because he was using a lot of the visual resources that the muralist was using, and I feel greatly inspired by them to use those visual resources in order to aggrandize the visual culture. I gradually started falling in love with the aesthetics of the modernists and the aesthetics of the early 20th century photographers like Capa, for example, that is sacrificing sometimes a little bit the technical aspect for a little bit more of emotional content in the images. I love his book, Slightly Out of Focus. Being a war photographer and working with so limited resources and cameras, he didn't have a chance to get things right, so to speak. And so, well, that's part of my inspiration, the work of those obviously sources of inspiration from the avant-garde from Mexico, Robert Capa, modern contemporaries like Corbin. And I think it is, in a way, Latin America that is shaping its own art rather than the other way around, because I think art in Latin American culture emerges from a culture of having a balance between work and leisure. Every culture has their own art expressions. Only I feel for others that are maybe more oriented to working for survival, because that there's economics theories that speak about the North and the South. The North probably is a place where you just have to focus on working and producing and saving, because the winter comes and you're dead if you don't have your food ready and your stuff ready and put together. And as you go south, people just stretch their hands and there's a fruit, or you just put your hand in the water and there's a fish, and that's your long. You don't have to save wood for the winter because there's no winter, really. So that necessarily creates a different outlook on life. The fact that you have more time for that kind of thing culturally places a priority on creating art, and that shapes art into something that is more detailed and more imbued into it.
How would you define Latin American photography in 3 words?
Organic, rebellious, and traditional. I feel like a lot of the art that I see in Mexico is very unapologetic.
Okay.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
Most of the art that I think this art that has been produced in Latin America has come in periods of deep cultural transition. there's a lot of turmoil. There's always been a lot of turmoil in Latin America. I don't know if it's the like the Latin spice thing with the blood boiling or what, but since times immemorial, there's some people say that the Aztecs, for example, in Mexico, they were hated by all the tribes around them because they were just using them for tribute, for human tribute, for political purposes. They were just conquering these towns and getting them as prisoners and sacrificing them, and then after that, getting more tributes. Pretty much just living at the expense, all those towns around them.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of tension there, and then when the Spaniards came, they brought a lot of excellent and beautiful things and culture, and it just blended with the Aztec culture and became something new and different. But at the same time, they also brought this class system division that is still very predominant in Latin America. This division that is creating sort of like the same resentment that the tribes used to have for the Aztecs. Now you can see that a lot in different social levels in Mexico, probably not really speaking with each other, and so I think that translates a lot into the art in certain ways. All this animosity sometimes, and they say, I have to, I think, for example, the muralists, when they've been doing their work, they were very, very rebellious against the historic tradition of Catholicism in Mexico, and they were not apologetic at all in their representation of bishops and priests and anything spiritual sometimes, because many of them were also communists or atheists or agnostics, and by nature of that, materialistic, so they had a different philosophical vision of all those things, but they would go ahead and put it out and present. I feel like Mexican art is in a way always trying to like make a point. Latin American art is always trying to make a point. There's a lot of folk art around Latin America also that throughout the colonial time was pretty much the evolution of indigenous art. Just and sometimes the theme and the subject matter might have changed a little bit, but the style was very similar to what we were doing before. And I feel, in a way, that was one way to say we are preserving our culture here. In a way, we're just going to keep doing what we were doing, even if we use it to represent different things or give a different message. But the style continues. So I think there's a lot of passion in Latin American culture, and that can sometimes get a little bit, translated into animosity or rebelliousness. A trend in Mexican photography for reflecting a spirit of protest of the things that go on. I mean, I'm sure maybe in Venezuela, they might be doing a similar thing.
Yeah.
But in Mexico, there's this highly politicized current, I think, of photography right now. And even movies, where people are following certain agendas and certain political perspectives, and they just do it with very strong feelings towards what they are presenting. A lot of it is protest also for, we have a party back in power that, had been re-electing itself for 75 years, and now they came back. So, I think that lack of alternance starts making a government less and less accountable and taking things for granted and probably taking more advantage of the power, and that's being reflected in certain good and bad decisions that have been made, and a lot of the people that have been affected greatly, they do not only photography but different types of art, installation, painting. So that affects a lot of the subject matter of art in Mexico currently.
Do you notice any differences attitude-wise or culturally when you're taking photographs in Latin America versus when you're taking photographs in the US?
Sometimes I would expect people to be more open since I'm communicating most of the time in the same language, and hopefully within the same culture. Once I was in Chiapas, and very nice traditional Indian town, and most people would either want a ton of money to be photographed, or they wouldn't allow me to take their photos. There's just be like warnings. They say don't take photos or you're gonna go to jail or things like that. Or places where I started interacting with someone, and then a moment happened. So the photographer comes out, and I start going crazy, shooting from all different angles. And then I see them retracting a little bit, saying, "Whoa, are we making a photo shoot here, or what's going on?" So I've been learning that lesson, just to be more respectful of people's privacy when I'm working on